Pyaar Plus presents a video by Riddhi Dastidar, a writer, journalist, and researcher who talks about queerness, living with OCD, and mental health.
So, I would definitely say that living with OCD impacts the way that I work, and the fact that sometimes, depending on what sort of stressors I'm going through, I might need a little bit more time and be a little bit slow in delivering reports or deadlines. And in those circumstances, I've negotiated with employers or commissioning editors. And the fact that I work on gender and disability as a researcher as well is obviously very helpful, because I can just it's a lot more normalized in that sense. But I don't feel ashamed of it. I think earlier I used to be extremely apologetic, but now I know that my body just needs this sort of accommodation, or works in this way. And I have enough confidence in my work to believe that I bring enough value to the table, also because of the perspectives and knowledge that I have. So I'm able to ask that. In terms of relationships, I would say that being neurodivergent definitely can impact friendships and the way that I interact with partners, especially in romantic relationships where there are often a lot of stressors and things feel extremely personal. It can come into play. And I think now I've been friends with my closest friends for close to 11 years, and I found my community, and they really, they know all about me, and they know the challenges that I deal with and everything about me that, you'd expect your close friends to know. And the same with my partner of 3 years now. So, I think I'm able to talk it out, but I also need to, I guess, remember sometimes to regulate my own emotions and to kind of calibrate if the ways that I'm behaving are healthy or fair perhaps to the other person. So, for instance, I used to have this phase in my relationship where I was very codependent, and if I was not around my partner, I would feel like I couldn't breathe. But I obviously, had to recalibrate and think, like, is it healthy to expect that sort of, being around one person all the time? And it wasn't. And so I was able to kind of cope with that and manage that. So that is one aspect. The other aspect that I think is very important is I was in an abusive relationship for 2 years, and that's my partner's cat in the background. Anyway, I was in an abusive relationship for 2 years, and it turned abusive like a couple of months in. I was deeply in love with this person. He was also, he also lived with a mental health condition. And I think back then I was not out, so to speak, professionally about living with a disability or, having OCD and depression, in the sense that it can really impact your life and be debilitating sometimes. And I had a lot of shame. And I stayed in the relationship for much, much longer at extremely great cost. He was abusive emotionally, physically, sexually. It took a lot from me by the time I left. And I think the reason I stayed much longer than I should have is because I thought, who else could love me? Because he knew. And I thought at least he accepts me. And I would say that that's a lie. And no one should believe that. Yeah. So, now I would never do that. And I would say that, yeah, you shouldn't put up with anybody treating you terribly because you think that they've had certain experiences in their past, or you think that you're unlovable, because both of those are lies. So, yeah, I would say that. So I would definitely say that one thing that's useful, if you are someone who is neurodivergent or queer or both, and don't necessarily see yourself, your specificities, or maybe even your friends like you represented that much in like popular culture or media in any sort of meaningful way, is to make lists, of people like you that you do see in like literature or books or in the public eye. So for instance, very specifically speaking, I maintain a list of writers and artists with OCD. And that just kind of makes me feel like, there's my community and I can aspire to cool things. So like the writer Alison Bechdel was also like a genius comic artist. It's extreme. She has OCD like me, and it just makes me feel like I'm part of something. The poet Paige Lewis, who is this amazing non-binary poet who writes, these strange and wonderful poems. So it's just, personally, that makes me feel really not alone, which is the opposite of how I grew up feeling, right? I grew up feeling a lot of shame. And instead, now just being neurodivergent and having this kind of body, this kind of brain is something that is cool to me. I would not advocate Twitter because it's Twitter, but I would also say that definitely for the neurodivergent and queer community in India, a lot of us find each other that way. And I've definitely made like queer friends, trans friends, neurodivergent friends through Twitter who I had not prior to that met them in real life. Since then I have, right? So that's obviously a good thing to have. Very practically speaking, I would say like just at every instance, I would say combat shame, because it is a lie that like a very neurotypical society feeds you, right? It feeds us. And so for me, when it's, advocating for myself at work, or often I worked in a number of nonprofits where, everything was very heteronormative. And perhaps I was one of the first persons to say that, that this is a very heteronormative way to look at things, and it can be difficult or uncomfortable. So it's really important to also do that without shame, hold your ground and know that you're not being unreasonable and you're actually contributing to changing the culture, but also know that it's not like you can step back. It's not your job to educate anyone because you're like the token queer person or the token like person who lives with a disability, for instance, right?
This video ends with two logos on a yellow background. The first one is a pink heart and a plus sign and has Pyaar Plus written underneath. And the second one is a green and black eye and has point of view written next to it.